Hello everyone, this is Naoto, Hydra beginner's tutorial, the 7th episode. In the last video we did add, blend, mult functions. Basically there was a kind of new idea that before we only have this like sandwich of like source, stuff and out, but now we have this kind of like nested sandwich. I don't know if Big Mac or whatever you say, this like add function. Okay, we can just like quickly recap because it's good to actually recap before we go into the next topic, which is a little bit more complicated. It's again, it's in this blend functions. I know that if you go to this API, I will just make myself a little bit smaller. There you go. If you compare to other functions, it's not a lot of functions in the blend. And as I said last time, probably sub is not so useful in the beginner's tutorial, so we're just looking to add layer blend, mult, diff, mask. But there's a lot to talk about because, okay, so let's just recap what we did. So in the previous videos, we always had this source and out, and things happen inside, like color to make color filter. In this case, it's just passing red, so it's red. Or you want to add geometry, like rotate. Well, I don't know actually what's the default parameter for this. Oh, it's kind of nice. Almost like diagonal because of the aspect ratio. Anyways, so this was like the idea that I say sandwich because it's OSC, or if it's like a source, well, in this case we need source S0, which we need to initialize. We need cam, and I will allow myself to appear. So we always had the source or whatever, OSC, noise, Voronoi, gradient, solid, and that's like wrapped, or the other side of this sentence or the line is out. And what we saw in the last video is this new idea that we take this and also in these functions always these parameters are numbers. It can be integer, it can be floating point, but always it's a number, like 1, 0.1, -1, 0. But these new functions that we explored in the last video is, for example, add, and I want to just add OSC, which is source itself. And again, we don't need add out here, or actually we should not have this. We just keep it like this. And now we can see that this source S0, it's me in this case, and adding OSC on top of myself. So that's why it's like super bright. Or if it's too bright, you can also do it with mult. But basically the idea is just like how you manipulate different layers in like Photoshop or GIMP or whatever image editing software you have, this notion of layers. And this is what we are exploring here. So we have this base layer, whichever can be base layer. We have this source S0 and OSC. With, for example, with mult, it will multiply two of them. Multiply in a sense that every pixel, they will take both images and like literally multiply. And in this case, it's not from 0 to 255, but it's compressed to 0 to 1. So it will not exceed 1 if both images are between 0 and 1. But again, in Hydra, you can actually multiply it more. Anyways, let's not go into there. But basically it's a pixel-wise operation, and the output is, in this case, my image is multiplied by the OSC image. So you see these stripes where the darker part will completely, suppress my image. Let's just stop it like this. You can see that, I'm in the prison or whatever. But you can see that the darker part of the OSC does not pass it's kind of like acting like a filter. And filtering is exactly like what we're going to do today in a way. But then we have to add this idea of like alpha channel. In this one here, we're actually not using alpha channel. It's all like opaque, even though the black part exists, they're actually opaque. And I'll just show you quickly in a second what I mean by opaque and transparent. So let's see. And for this, we're going to use two different functions. I'm going to start with layer, but also we're going to explore mask in a bit in this video. So what is layer? Let's just like try what happens if we just replace it. The idea with the layer is the same, that it's not giving the number, like it's not like this, but it's giving another source. And what happens is that, surprise, you don't see me anymore. Because what's happening here is it's just like Photoshop layers, that you add another layer on top of the base layer. Well, add is maybe not a good word because it's confusing with add function. So it's just layering on top of it. And if this layer is completely opaque, then it will just cover the base layer completely. And that's what is happening, because OSC, it's not transparent. These black parts are not transparent, but it's opaque pixels. Like it's like black ink, basically. If it's like black ink, it's not transparent, right? So you don't see what's behind. So basically you're like painting myself, the base layer, or whatever, if you use noise or if you use Voronoi, anyways, you won't see it, because OSC is a completely like opaque paint with white and black ink, so you don't see anything behind. But what we want is to see somehow like not completely transparent, then it's just the base layer, is nothing happening. What we want is to have some parts of this OSC to be transparent and some parts to be opaque, so we can have kind of interesting effect. I mean, I'll show you what I mean by that. So one way of achieving this is to use Luma. And it's actually very simple. You just add Luma to OSC, not to the source S0 or base layer. So yeah, basically I call the first part base layer and what's inside layer, because what's inside layer is going to be on top of the base layer. So I think it's good to use that terminology. So this layer or source, I added Luma, and let's execute it. Voila. So what is happening here is that Luma it's a bit like thresh function, and we have seen this before, but because in the previous videos we didn't work with different layers, well, when we talk about Luma we didn't have different layers, so I didn't explain this well, but I think I hinted that I will talk about this further in the future videos. So now is the time. And what is happening here is that Luma is only passing colors that are brighter than the parameter, which is by default it's 0.5. So whatever color in OSC that's brighter than 0.5 will be passed, but other ones will completely become, well, almost become transparent. Because I said almost because this kind of like harshness is defined by the second parameter, which you can make, for example, 0.1 or a little bit bigger. Oops. Then it becomes a little bit blurry, the boundary. But let's keep it to 0, for example. Then you can see like really harsh, like sharp transition. And basically what is happening is that whatever pixel in OSC that is brighter than 0.5, which is kind of gray-ish, middle point between black and white. If it's brighter than that, it will pass. So you see these like bars. So again, I'm stuck in prison. But the darker ones become completely transparent, which means that if this function is layered on top of something, then you will see what's behind, which is the base layer. You might question, like, so what happened in the previous video when I explained Luma? We can actually try it. I'll just put it here because if you evaluate only this function, only this line with Control Enter, or even if you evaluate the whole code with Control Shift Enter, what happens is that only the last one will take into effect because now it's kind of overwriting. Here it's out, but here it's doing another out. So this will be like overwriting whatever comes. So if you do Control-Shift-Enter, then you can basically evaluate this one and kind of skip this one. Anyways, or if you're like kind of cautious, you can also do / to comment out so that Hydra will completely skip this line, telling Hydra that, you know, this is not, it's just a comment. Well, it's a legitimate terminology, it's a comment. But it's still, you know, for us it's useful because then if we want to go back to this line, we can just comment it in. Anyways, so I'll just comment it out just to be explicitly sure that we're not using this line, we're just interested in this line. And what happens here is that these parts become black. The darker part, darker than 0.5, will become black. And it's actually not, well, it is black because the sad news is that we cannot make the computer screen completely transparent. We cannot see through, or we cannot see the electronics behind. So we have to decide, I mean, in this case, Hydra or the browser has to decide, you know, what happens if it's like, we're just trying to show completely transparent image. We cannot make it, you know, transparent in theory. So just, you know, because of Hydra, how it's implemented, it decided to show black. But it's not, so this is not black from OSC Luma, but it's kind of this like base layer that is black. And this is actually quite confusing, and I get sometimes confused because it sometimes feel like, okay, this is producing black, or no, actually it's the base layer that's producing black. So I know it's confusing, but just maybe let's keep in mind that there is no pure transparency. Otherwise, I will look through the screen and I don't know what's going to happen in this video that you will see behind YouTube. I don't know. Anyway, so we cannot do that. So there is like base layer that is like decided, that I think Olivia decided that it's going to be black. So we see black, but it's not coming from OSC Luma. And if we use this to be layered on top of something, by the way, I did Control/ to kind of toggle, but I think I'm not going to need this anymore. So in this case, the base layer exists, which is source S0, so it's showing me. And if like base layer is also transparent, then you will see black because it's the base layer that is decided to be black. So it's a little bit long explanation, but this is Luma, and this is super handy because now I'm using OSC, but you can also use, like, I don't know, Voronoi or whatever that you want to use. Basically, whatever that's less than 0.5 becomes transparent, and whatever is more than 0.5 will not change. And that's actually quite a big difference between Thresh and Luma, because in the case of Thresh, it will produce black or white image if the second parameter is 0. But Luma is alpha or else. Like it can also produce gray, or it can produce like red. For example, if you put gradient, you see that like I'm like drowning. This part above is darker, so it's completely transparent. And what is, I suck at this, the bottom part roughly has the color, so it preserves color. And if you do Thresh, and always like it's important to compare with Thresh. So Thresh is not only producing black and white, so actually the border is the same, right? What you just saw with Luma. The border where this happens is the same, but Thresh does not produce transparent image. So if you want to use layer, you always have to use Luma, and you cannot use Thresh. Otherwise, it will just completely mask the image. Just like how I explained in the first example with OSC, the black part is like black paint. It's not transparent. So you're like covering what's behind in the base layer. So this is a big difference. And you might think, then what if I want to make this gradient part of it transparent, but I also want this the rest to be like white with a thresh effect, for example, or thresh function. I try to not use the word effect because these functions are more than effect as I iterate. So, for example, you can just say, I'm going to just do thresh first and then do luma. That's one way of doing it. You see a little bit of like this blurriness because the second parameter of the thresh is not 0 by default. I think it's 0.3 or something? No, 0.5, something like this. But if you do 0, then it will be like sharp transition this way. You can change them. So first do thresh and luma, and then you will produce just white image. And it's the same with, like, for example, OSC, that you might have thought this is like kind of interesting, but it has some kind of shade inside the white part because, again, luma is not producing just white, but it preserves the brighter part, like the original color. So it has this shade, and if you don't like it, then you just add thresh, like 0.5, 0, then it becomes like pitch white bars that is overlaid on top of myself. So I'm not going to explain like all these, like tricks, because that's up to you. It's like a assignment. I'm not checking. It's a task for you to explore what combination works, what happens if I put luma first and put thresh later. Okay, it actually works because now we're feeding transparent image to thresh, like partly transparent, and thresh is preserving alpha. It's not producing transparent part, but it's preserving that part. So anyways, like, you just figure out, and sometimes you don't need to know all these like background, like what is happening mathematically. Sometimes I get crazy about this, so that's why like I explain a lot in this Hydra book. But you don't have to to know everything what's behind. Just try it, and if this works, great. If this works, it's great. And I don't know, if you want to use Voronoi, and if this works, that's great. And what if you want to like color it later? Like in this case, I can just like do luma, but I want some colors. You can of course do like color 1.0 to make it red, for example. I'm just deliberately not moving Voronoi, but of course you're allowed to move it. But of course it changes the result slightly if you bring this color before luma. Well, not slightly, it's actually drastically changed. That's because if you just check this one, the thing is that if you compare this to the original grayscale Voronoi, it's not just becoming red, but it's suppressing green and blue channels. So after all, you will have like less brightness overall. You're like making it almost like a third of brightness. It's technically not, because the brightness is not calculated as a sum of RGB, but there is some other, like, I think it's because of the perception or something. I don't remember how it's calculated, but it's a little bit different from how, just combining RGB. I mean, just summing them. There is a little bit like a weighted average kind of thing happening. Anyways, you are like suppressing green and blue channels. So what happens if you do luma is that it doesn't qualify as more than 0.5. What can we do? Like, you can just switch the order to do luma first and do color, or you can just experiment with the parameter of luma that, okay, maybe if you do like 0.1, then you start to see some things. Maybe I will do this to make it a bit more sharp. So again, just try things, and maybe it's a parameter, maybe it's the order, maybe it's a combination of functions. There are like so many things, so many patterns that you can create. And sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's not, completely disappearing Voronoi, whatever. But it's really important for you to actually do hands-on coding. And it's kind of funny that I have a third eye now, like it's here. It's for you to try and see what works, doesn't work. And please share with others in the comment down below or in the Discord group, Facebook group, wherever you find it's cozy to be in, and just share your experience, or you can ask them, you know, do you think this would work, or like if this doesn't work, can anyone help me? And probably people can, you know, spot what can be changed to make your desired visuals, for example. So that's layer. So that's why like layer itself is quite complicated, because Hydra doesn't come with like all these sources, doesn't come with alpha channel natively. And so Luma is one way to produce alpha, and another way to produce, I think actually I kind of like this Voronoi pattern right now. So I'll try to use this somehow to work with layer in another way. And for this, it's going to be a bit longer, so I'll just like make this punctuation with new lines. And from now on, I cannot do Control Enter, because Control Enter is only evaluating one line. We want all the code to be evaluated, so we want to do Control Shift Enter to evaluate everything. And whatever, unless you like divide the word or the number, like this will be a problem. But if you put new line somewhere here or there, it's fine. It's just like, again, it's for you to discover like what works for you, like to find your workflow or whatever. You know, maybe you want punctuation here. It's up to you. I'm just suggesting one way of doing this, and especially like for this demonstration, what would make sense. But it's not that you have to stick to this. Whatever that works for you is great. And especially, I'm just emphasizing this part because it's so important for you to, you know, find your workflow. Because if you're making images, or you're making something for the website, or if you're performing on the stage, especially if you're performing on stage, you want to make it so that you don't get confused while you're performing, and you can comfortably, and it's also important that you don't make a lot of syntax errors while you're coding. So this kind of like new line, it's a trivial thing, but it's really like for you to be like conscious and try like different patterns. What does it work? What doesn't work? I know that, for example, like when I compare to other coders, it's a little bit different. Or sometimes I just make a super long, no punctuation code. And you know, that's also like connected to like space, for example. Like in normal programming, I think this is convention to add space after comma. In Hydra, I mean, in normal programming, I do it. In Hydra, I don't do it often, because for me, it's like better to see everything tight. Because anyways, the code will grow and grow, and like this space, I don't see it that important, so I don't do it. But of course, if you see it more useful, helpful, then just do it. But like new line for me is quite important, that I can see that this is what is the sandwich. I need to see that what pairs to the other side of the sandwich. So this is like something I would suggest, but you know, you might agree or disagree. But yeah, please try it out, how to navigate with this structure of the code. It's really up to you. Okay, but I think it's important to talk about this, because now I'm adding mask function, which is, again, just like Luma, we will do it inside layer. So it's going to be here, and just like other functions in this family, we add another source here. So we're having source function inside another function, inside another function, because this is, so for example, like OSC. Like, I mean, I just like OSC, so I just did it. But now we're saying that OSC is inside the mask, which is connected all the way to this Voronoi, that is inside this layer. So it's getting super confusing, but just bear with me. It's okay. Just gonna evaluate it. So this is really interesting now, because we're kind of like feeding this two information into one. So Voronoi color. Oops, I need to refresh the page. And okay, So what is happening is this Voronoi color is the kind of visual, visual pattern, everything is visual, but what is making this color texture? But then OSC is kind of dictating the alpha channel. Like literally, like OSC is the one who's deciding the alpha channel of it. So I still see this kind of like, I'm in the prison again. And the background, the base layer doesn't change, right? Because it's a source is 0. But the way that you see this alpha channel, the transparency, comes from OSC. And before it was just like this, actually. Before we were just like kind of repeating this OSC as kind of the color pattern and the mask pattern. This is like very similar to what we just saw, like Luma. I know it's different, but it's very like idea is the same, that you see the color and transparency like connected, like bound together. But in this case, when we do like Voronoi color, mask, OSC, it's completely different in a sense that now we have completely two different information. Like Voronoi as a color, like showing this red color, but the transparency is not coming from Voronoi. It's coming from OSC. So you kind of make this hybrid within this one line of code, or if you want to be more, how to say, like tidy up this more, then you can add new lines here and there to make it a bit more clear to understand, so that this shows the hierarchy that OSC is inside mask, which is this coming from this Voronoi color mask, which is inside the layer. So now you start to see that it's a little bit, this kind of hierarchy and all these things are a little bit complicated, but it gives you a lot of freedom to work with layers using mask, like much more than Luma. Luma is like simple, and I think it's very effective in some cases, and I'm not saying that don't use Luma, right? It's sometimes like super effective, and I also use that. But mask unlocks a lot of things. For example, like I don't use shape in this video a lot, but I personally really like this function shape. Let's check shape first. So it's basically like a triangle, but then if you recap, this is the default parameter. If you make it 4, 5, it's the like n gone, like hexagon, octagon, and so on. And I didn't actually tell like what mask is, but basically mask is replacing let's keep it simple. So replacing this Voronoi color, what's coming before, their alpha channel with the brightness of what's inside mask. So in this case, we made this bar kind of, prism kind of visual effect because of OSC. The brightness of OSC was like replacing the alpha channel. So if we do, for example, shape 6, I'll just like delete this. Then what's going to happen is that this shape 6 is replacing the alpha channel of Voronoi color. So only the white part of the shape, which is inside here, passes through, and the rest, the black part of shape 6, I mean, it's kind of weird way to say it, but around the shape, but anyways, becomes transparent. Great. What if I want to flip it? So I want to keep what's around the shape, but only like making transparent inside. Then your friend is invert. So I'm just like gonna invert, and I can make it super explicit. So we have shape 6, and so what we just saw is like this, and if we invert the color like this. So if we use this as a mask, now you see me trapped in the Voronoi. And if you don't like, these corners, you can make it into a circle by making the shape like big number. It's oval, but again, I can show it to you, not shape, scale, and 0.6 or something. then it will become closer to circle. If you want the shape to be a little bit bigger, the second parameter, I think the default parameter is 0.3. So it's a little bit small. I think it's compared to the screen. So if you do like 1, it's kind of like hitting the edge, right? Because the scale was a little bit confusing now. Yeah, you hit the edge. That's like 1. So if you want to cover, I don't know, the radius to be like, the diameter to be half of the screen, then it's like 0.5, and you can see it like this. I'm going to refresh it again. So you get the idea. You can like, and I, of course, like, I can go on and on and on about this, but I'm not gonna, it's really like up to you how to use this. Like you can combine it with like, with, it can be a shape to be the mask. I like this pattern a lot. Also like shape 4, it's basically rectangle. It's I think it's kind of like makes like interesting structure that like often like Hydra is like doesn't have structure in a way, in a good way, but sometimes you want to have some kind of visual, like geometric structure, and I think this works quite well in a way. So this is one thing, and also, but it's really up to you, or you don't want to invert whatever, just make it simpler. And now my face is gone inside the Voronoi, and maybe just change the changes to blue or something. Anyways, just for fun. But yeah, like just with this code, you can do so many things, so many interesting things, and also like you don't have to stick to Voronoi. If you have extra webcam, you might want to add source S1 as like different source, different webcam, and you can combine images. That's also possible. But if you change with that shape into OSC, whatever you can do. And it's really like up to you to explore. Just, I think what's super important is that it's really like, if you don't do hands-on coding, you won't learn. Like just watching this video wouldn't really help. It's really important that, sometimes you want to stop the video and try yourself, or after watching this video, you might want to, come back to, I don't know, a certain point and then code by yourself, whatever you like. And if you have questions, please write it down below, or contact me on, I don't know, Mastodon or by email, or ask people around on Discord or Facebook group. Everyone's super helpful, and I hope this is informative. And in the next video, I haven't actually thought about the topic, because now we almost... No, actually, there's modulate to come. Okay, so it's quite clear that it's good to come back to this Hydra functions, the API, that we will talk about modulate. And after the modulate, I think we cover like everything, quote unquote. Other things, I might go to these like parameters of Hydra that might be useful. Some of them I think I told you, like BPM and so on, or speed, was it? There's also like some things to work on arrays, audio. There are some topics that we can talk about, and I want to cover everything. But also there are things that are not in the document, not in the Hydra functions, but for example, like topics like feedback. And feedback, for example, is like definitely something we need to have this like kind of basics of layers, and then we can build it up. Like it's more like advanced topic. I do have advanced videos in my channel. But I might redo some of these videos so that it kind of like have good progression from, from 0 to now we have layers, and in the next video we have modulate, and then from there we can build up again to, again in my case, to talk about feedback, or more like kind of advanced tricks to work with colors and so on. So please let me know what your wishes are. I would really love to make this as interactive as possible. Yeah, so the next one will be modulate, but hopefully you have the background of how to work with blending functions, and now with within the blending functions, now we can work with layers using Luma or mask. And yeah, so I will maybe invert this again, so my big face is appearing again. And I appreciate your comments. Please hit like if you find this useful, and please subscribe to my channel. And until next video, have a nice day and see you in the next video. Bye.